I've been trying not to come here too often, just to give you updates when something important comes up that I think needs to be explored or exploded. And today, I think that there's a development that needs to be exploded. Now, as you know, there was talk about the discipline services, and I think that's been put to rest because I haven't seen anybody try to come back after that latest disgraceful letter from Lieutenant Colonel Gomes talking about 8,000 discipline services. So that latest spin got hit where it belonged, and hopefully that's now a non-issue. But there's a new issue that continues to infiltrate quietly, and I see the APNU spin hounds making a big deal of it. So I want to address it. It has to do with overseas voters. Now, before the elections, there was litigation concerning the house-to-house registration. The stated purpose of that, you'll remember, there was an aborted effort to conduct house-to-house registration. It was a claim to sanitize the list, which did not need to be sanitized. But it involved an intention to remove from the list people who were perceived to be overseas. And that was unlawful, because the fact is that if you're Guyanese living in New York or living in Toronto or living in Barbados, you're Guyanese just like you, just like me, and you're entitled to vote. Once you come home to vote at your place of vote. So the Court of Appeal concluded very quickly and very easily that overseas Guyanese can vote once they come home to vote and once they register to vote, and that was put to rest. But it left a door open for some spin, because what happened after the first hurdle of Mingo's fraud was overcome, and the second hurdle of Mingo's second read from the spreadsheet was overcome, and the parties were forced to do a recount, which so far has been done credibly. The writing appeared to be on the wall, and therefore I'm going to use the cliche, forgive me, the narrative, the story changed from we won to the elections aren't credible. I see that this new story doesn't lend to a conclusion that we won. It now lends to a conclusion that you can't trust these elections. The figures aren't reliable. And one aspect of it that has been pushed and pushed and pushed without any evidence whatsoever has been the contention that Guyanese registered to vote and marked off on the list as having voted were not in Guyana at the time. So every time a ballot box is opened in that location to be counted, the APNU agent, well, I say every time, but that's not exactly true. They got places like Beirut, where out of 200 voters, you got 6 people that voted PPP. In Beirut, APNU is not going to object that overseas people voted. But in other areas where it's more balanced, where you have enough votes for PPP, enough votes for APNU, the APNU agent will call numbers. I've seen them call as many as 140 numbers and ask if these numbers, the people represented by these numbers, are shown on the GCOM list as having voted. And the overworked GCOM official will have to go through this 100 list, this list of 100, and say, these 6 people voted. And I'm not exaggerating. It goes from 100 down to 6. And with a straight face, the APNU officer will say, APNU objects that these people were out of the country. And then the question is asked, how do you know? And APNU will say, we will present that evidence at a later date. So that if the GCOM official is doing her job, she will say no evidence, and the observation sheet will say no evidence. And all the other parties will then object and say no evidence is presented. And again, if the GCOM officer is doing her job, you will see that entry, no evidence. So you have this bare assertion, this bald statement, unsupported by one person. Them 6 numbers that I just cast a wide fishing net and I caught 6 numbers were out of the country. Now, that should never even have taken off. That shouldn't have gotten off the ground. That should be treated as rubbish because it's rubbish. GCOM had on election day a very strict method of screening anybody who came in to vote. You showed your ID. I've gone through this ad nauseum. I've gone through this over and over. You show your ID, they compare it to your face. All the party reps, all the GCOM officials look, conform as you, then they take your name off, you're going to vote, stick your finger in the ink. So GCOM's own record, the fact that your number is ticked off, means that this process went through, and the APNU agent, the PPP agent, and the GCOM presiding officer and agents all agreed that this person was here and voted. GCOM can't look behind that. They can't go to get outside evidence to try to disprove what their own record, generated by their own system, has provided. And therefore, when this thing first came up, the question was asked of GCOM through their chair, what are you going to do with this evidence? What are you going to do with these bare allegations that have no foundation and no substance? And all of you will remember that wonderful expression, he who alleges must prove. That was the chairman's response. You allege this thing, you got to prove it. And then Aubrey Norton stood here and said, well, we give the allegation and GCOM got to prove it. So this led to a problem, because you have this mythical situation created about overseas folk. And then you have GCOM saying, if you all say so, you got to prove it. And you have the person who made the allegation saying, GCOM got to prove or disprove. So we were stuck in a curious situation. And I've said before that GCOM is not a court. GCOM can't go and interview, examine, cross-examine, take evidence from people out there. Police commissioner, immigration department. GCOM can't go and do that and take extraneous information and try to incorporate it into its own records. So GCOM had a problem. And therefore we were all taken aback. I won't say surprised, but we were all taken aback when this letter surfaced, written by the chairman, Claudette Singh, addressed to Mr. James, Commissioner of Police, and also Chief Immigration Officer, attaching a list of names and saying, APNU agents say that these people are out of the country, can you confirm, or these people in the country? Now, whatever response comes from Mr. James cannot be relied on by GCOM, because it is external to GCOM's system, to how they generate their record, and is something that somebody said. But despite that, there was a response that we've seen, where Mr. James listed, I think it was 172 names. According to our records, these people are out of the country, 172. There are a couple things I want to say about that. The list from Mr. James, as he has said, I think there was a police statement from their public relations folk, came from their computer system, because they have a computer system of people who leave at the airport and who come back at the airport. I don't know if that was intended to give us comfort that this list came from a computer system, because we know how a computer works. A computer doesn't generate information all by itself. You put in information, you take out information. If you're an employee and anybody who works in the system, all the media know. When you're typing up on your computer, see a man typing on his computer, he puts in that information, and if he doesn't like it, he takes it out. So that when he prints out from his computer a document, that document on its face can't be treated as the truth, because it's what he put in and what he took out. And therefore, we can't blindly accept some computer statement from Mr. James to say these 172 people were out of the country, because we don't know the method by which that information went in. We don't know who looked at that information and who troubled it and who adjusted it. And we don't know who printed it out, so that that printout sent to the chairman represents accurately what the records are. In a court, all of that is explored before that document is even looked at. And if you have any doubts about the problems created by blindly using a document printed from a computer, I will invite you to remember a document printed from a computer that was called a spreadsheet that was relied on by Mr. Mingo to start doing a count that we all know, the whole country now knows, is false. So, having proved one computer document in the form of a spreadsheet is false, I would really look askance at any official in GCOM or out of GCOM who asks for another spreadsheet from somebody else and without thinking about it decides that the spreadsheet is true. But we don't need to get into those technicalities, because as soon as that list came out, people started to come forward. Lady in Essequibo. Here I am with my ID, gentleman in Sisters Village in Borbis with his wife. Here we are with our IDs. How can you say we weren't on the list? And then the most hilarious one, Dave Kissoon, counsel, accredited observer on 2nd of March. The man who acted for the PPP in the two cases, the two pieces of litigation, Ulita Moore and the other one, after the elections. Mr. James says Dave Kissoon was out of the country on the 2nd. I had to call Dave Kissoon. I said, man, I saw you on the 2nd and I am beginning to doubt myself. Please prove you were here. The man sent me a photograph. Him and another observer standing up in an elections place, in a place of poll, observing on the 2nd of March. So let me ask you, do we, with our knowledge that we now have about the reliability of spreadsheets and computer-generated documents, and our experience of Mr. Mingo the Invisible, how do we look at this spreadsheet that the chief immigration officer has attached to a letter and said here are 172 names, when we know Dave Kissoon is in the country? I was just speaking to a member of ANOG. One of his employees, name on the list, not in the country, but there that person was voting on the 2nd, and he knows they're in the country because he knows the people. What is to be done with this list? Legally speaking, GCOM can't do anything with it, but morally speaking, GCOM can't do anything with it. And even if you got through all of that, you bypass all of that, you say don't worry with Mingo, don't worry with Dave Kissoon, we taking this list of 172 names. Right now, it looks as if PPP will win this recount by 13, 14, 15,000 votes. 13, 14, 15,000 votes. Now, let's do the maths and compromise the 172 names that were not there and tell me what effect that has on that lead. So what is GCOM supposed to do with a spreadsheet of unknown origin? They didn't check who made it, how it was entered, who printed it out, how it got to them. And the effect of the spreadsheet, even if they could check all of that, which they can't, is 13,000 minus 172, all right. They win by 12,828 votes. What's the effect of that? The entire process here, where the APNU agents are calling out 100 names, and when 6 of them are ticked objecting to those 6 names, is a process designed to confuse, designed to mislead, designed to undermine what is a good process that worked. Just like Mr. Mingo tried to confuse, mislead, and undermine a good process that worked. One spreadsheet should not be replaced by another spreadsheet. Now, the second thing I wanted to discuss with you is the stage we are at here. There's been a myriad of little acts of tyranny going on in there. They're designed to frustrate. We're all Guyanese, we know about little acts of tyranny. People who cold shoulder you or they're reluctant to help you, that kind of thing. That's what happens in there. So every time one agent makes an objection, it's solemnly written down, and when the other agent protests, we're not writing that down. That's what happens in there. Those little acts of tyranny. But despite all of that, we're at a stage where the other regions are nearly complete and only region 4 boxes from Georgetown going up the east coast are left to be counted. Now when we checked our own records, these are the contentious areas. So if I was anxious not to have Mr. Mingo exposed, now is the time that I would try to do something to interrupt the process. If I was anxious not to have Mr. Mingo exposed further, now is the time that I would try to slow down the process, interfere with the process. So ANOG is keeping a close eye because it's now getting hot. We're now at the finish line, we're at the home stretch. And we have been placed at the home stretch at a stage where it is the contentious ballots left to count. So I'm going to signal our hand, because what we've done is we've collated the records we have, and I've admitted from day one our records aren't complete. We only got slightly over 100 SOPs ourselves to compare to Mingo's count. But we have some, we have enough. And we will be, when those boxes are called and counted, we will be following that count. And when the count is complete, we will be saying to the supervisor in charge that if your count shows, as we are sure it will show, 76 votes for APNU, and we see, according to Mr. Mingo's spreadsheet, 106 votes given by Mr. Mingo instead of 76, that information is on GCOM's record. That spreadsheet they have, they generated it themselves. His count, the audio of his count which we've all heard, they have. And the recount and the statement of poll they have. This isn't external information that they're going to get evidence from Mr. James, that may or may not be reliable. This is their own records. And we will be saying to the supervisor, please place on your observation sheet that here where you have just counted 76 votes for APNU, your own record reflects Mr. Mingo said 106. And we will inform you if the supervisor agrees to place that on the observation sheet, or if the supervisor refuses to place that on the observation sheet. But we wish you to know that now is the time that it's going to get hot. And now is the time to see if any effort is made to interrupt what is happening. Are there any questions?
Mr. Jonas, just for clarity, has there been a pattern of refusal by staffers and GCOM to note objections being made to other objections?
Yes. There has been a consistent pattern to allow by the APNU agent not just an objection, but to give him information. So he doesn't say, I object to numbers 7, 14, and 23. He says, please tell me, not just 7, 14, 23, but he'll call 100 other numbers if they voted, if their numbers are ticked off. And it's only when the GCOM official responds with the information that by only 6 of these people voted. He then says, I object to those 6. So this is a process, this is an interface in what should be a transparent situation between the APNU agent and the GCOM official. Because we don't see when she's reading the book to see what's ticked off. And we have asked, and she said, well, she's not showing us that. So the transparency went out the window. But I'm not going to second guess that at this stage, because the whole process is flawed, where you're trying to talk about overseas votes in a process that has nothing to do with this recount. So even that, as I say, little acts of tyranny, little injustices have to be endured so that you get to the end result.
And you're concerned now that at the end of this process, a supervisor may refuse to note valid objections that you are making to disparities between this count and the Region 4 count.
Well, the distinction, as I said, is that the original assessment by Mr. Mingo is part of their record. So we're not asking them to go outside. We're saying, according to what we have here, your record shows that whereas we are now recounting at 76, your officer declared 106. And I'm showing you my hand now. I'm telling you in advance. As Muhammad Ali would say, I'm telegraphing my punch. I am telling you what I'm going to do. And I will appear right here and tell you what the response from the supervisors is.
Have you ventilated your concern about refusals to note your objections to any of the hire-ups?
Well, there has been a pattern, and we have complained verbally. We have gone up, we have talked about it, we've had meetings. But you see, you have 3 CARICOM observers, you have a small number of OAS observers, you have a commission that doesn't come and sit down in the workstations. So what you have are supervisors who are in charge of their workstation. Some of those supervisors are professional. Some of them work quickly, they don't tolerate delay, they get the job done. So I'm not casting aspersion on all, but there are some who will bend over backwards to slow the process down, to accommodate unreasonable requests, and when objection is taken, to decline to entertain the objection.
How involved would you say are the 6 members of the commission and the chair in the day-to-day runnings of this recount?
It's impossible for me to say that. I don't know how often they meet. I don't know when they meet and in what forum. They're not there. Many of them are physically present in the building, but you don't see them in the workstations. I have seen the chairman come into the workstation once, where I was. I don't know. I'm sure she has been in others, but that's a brief visit and out again. But except for that one time, I haven't seen her in any workstation, and the other commissioners similarly. We got to remember, the 2 large parties designed this, and they cancel each other out. The 6 commissioners cancel each other out. This boils down to the chairman. She has the casting vote on every decision, because the 6 commissioners will cancel each other out.
What about the involvement of the CARICOM scrutineers? Would you say that they are overwhelmed by the sheer number of stations and the amount of work that's going on?
You know, I'll tell you something. I saw in the Starbuck News the other day a picture of myself and I don't know if it was Ralph Armcran or another ANOC member, face to face with one of the CARICOM scrutineers, and she had her finger up. And the caption said, Jonas and so in conversation with the CARICOM observers. Now, that caption was so misleading that I'm embarrassed by it. And if I see the lady again, I will apologize. Because what happened is she came up and somebody introduced her, said, Mrs. So-and-so, this is Tim Jonas, this is Ralph Armcran. And I greeted her by saying, I hope you will be here beyond the 25 days. And she didn't say a word. She wagged her finger at me, and she turned around and she walked away. So in that entire exchange, the poor lady said not a word. And I'm telling you this because it is important for them not to be saying a word. It is important for them to be neutral, to be objective, to observe, and then to put their report in. And they have professionally adhered to that. They have been doing a good job. But 3 people working 11 hours a day for what will now be, 25 plus another 13 days, every single day, trying to oversee more than 10 workstations is an impossible task for Hercules, let alone those 3 little people.
Mr. Jonas, just for clarity, sir.
I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Can you?
This is Swatland Marshall from the Guyana Chronicle.
Good day, Miss Marshall.
Good day to you, sir. Just for clarity, sir, are you saying that the law prohibits the Elections Commission from accessing immigration record at any stage?
I don't think I said that.
Just for clarity.
Okay. If I'm in charge of an organization and somebody comes to me and says your employee has been acting fraudulently, I am going to investigate to see if I got to fire this person or punish this person. If I don't do that, I'm a poor leader. I'm not running my organization properly. But insofar as a request is made for external information which may contradict my own record, and I know how I generated my record, and I generated my record according to a legal procedure which is set out, I cannot lawfully accept external information to contradict my own record that I created. I am bound by my record because I'm not a court. If you, Miss Marshall, want to come to me and say, look, I know that Jonas was out of the country on the 2nd of March, GCOM cannot listen to you because your evidence will have to be tested by cross-examination. I'll have to say, who are you? Where were you on the 2nd? When did you see Jonas? What evidence did you have? Did you see him out of the country? Did you talk to him? How do you know negative that the man wasn't in this whole country? Suddenly your eyes can't be in the whole country. So your evidence will have to be cross-examined. And that is why this information can only be explored in a court. GCOM has its record, and GCOM's record was created by a statutory procedure that is a good procedure. And so far as I have seen, there has been nothing to impugn that procedure that was done on the 2nd of March when everybody showed their ID or signed a contract of an oath and put their finger in the ink and voted in the presence of APNU reps, in the presence of PPP reps, and in the presence of GCOM officials.
Sir, would you agree that Regulation 40 of the National Registration Act allows for GCOM to access immigration records?
Not at this stage. Would you like to read if you disagree with me? Would you like to read it out?
No, sir, I'm not here for that.
Okay. Any other questions?
The other thing, sir, if I can go before...
No, well, I'm sorry, Ms. Marshall, because you raised Section 40, and I answer your question. But then I challenge you as to where in Section 40 you premise your question, and you don't want to go there. And I have a problem with that.
Sorry, not here for debate.
Exactly. Me neither. Which is why if I feel your premise of your question is wrong, I am not going to entertain the other question.
You're not going to entertain any of my other questions?
I am going to invite you to explain Section 40.
I'm not here for that.
Well, I'm sorry, I will not.
So, yes,
anyone else?
As I was saying, if there was a case...
Ms. Marshall.
My colleague who I think still enjoys the right to ask the second question without condition.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, I am not going to answer it unless the first one is explored.
But I'm not here for that. I asked a simple question.
I don't think that is a good basis for neglecting my colleague's question.
Mr. Shabral.
That is discriminatory.
Mr. Shabral, I will answer any fair question. And for the purpose... Are you going to allow me to finish, please? Are you going to allow me to finish, or are we debating?
Well, we are certainly in a discussion
Good.
on the matter.
So let me finish then. I am here to try to lend clarity to a situation. I have said many times, I don't want to spin. I want us to discuss facts. I want us to discuss what we can all see and understand in a way that does not brook spin, it does not brook noise. So I have been asked about Section 40 of an act, and I've answered the question. But I might be wrong, because I don't have Section 40 here. I might be taken by surprise. I don't want tomorrow for some member of the media to say, look, Section 40, Jonas was talking nonsense. So I want in this open forum, given that someone has introduced a section of an act that none of us are seeing, I want for us, in the interest of transparency, to say this is what it says, let's agree or let's disagree, and then let's move forward. But if you throw Section 40, anybody here knows what Section 40 is? Good. If you throw Section 40 like somebody memorized the dictionary, and then when I've answered, you run away and you move on to something else, then we in this forum are not being fair to the audience that we are trying to provide clarity for. We are not being fair to the people who are listening, none of whom have Section 40. But what we are doing is we're opening the door for somebody to spin tomorrow and say, look what happened here, read Section 40. Because we've all been blindsided. I have a problem with that. Maybe I'm wrong. But I have a problem with giving half of the information. Giving half of the information. Answering a question that's based on a premise that I haven't seen. And is not disclosed to me, and is not disclosed to your public. Because you may say to me, I gotta answer a question. And I will say to you, you have a responsibility to your listeners. You have a responsibility that when you've finished your broadcast, when you've finished your talk, there mustn't be any questions. Everybody must nod and say, thank you, I understand. And right now, all of these listeners and all of you, you don't know what Section 40 says?
I know what Section 40 says, but I'm not here for that. I asked a simple question,
so,
it was answered, and I'm moving
I'll
to
invite you
question.
again. Would you like to explore Section 40? Well, then I'm afraid I will not answer.
Answered, and I respect your response. Sir,
Thank you.
My next question is...
No, you're missing my point. I will not answer your next question.
My next question is, sir...
Is there anyone else?
My next question
is there a provision for the commission to access this information?
It's the same thing I asked.
Okay.
But I guess it's okay to hear you and ask the same question.
No, but you cannot
If Mr. Jonas is not going to answer a police question, because you here to ask a question and Mr. Jonas respectfully, you came to give an interview, you should be prepared to answer our question. It's not a back and forth where we have to provide responses.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, sir. What's your name?
And I'm saying that
I'm sorry, sir. What's your name? If you're going to say something.
yourself for questioning, you should
I'm sorry, sir. What is your name and what outfit do you represent?
be responding. If not, you're free to leave.
So let's talk about the media.
No, it's a
What is your
that's
name?
an insult
What
to our
outfit do you
police.
represent?
As someone who, as a presidential, as someone who's involved in the electoral process, we equally would expect you to be knowledgeable about all the relevant laws.
Dennis, I can't memorize the dictionary, Dennis. I'm sorry. Are there all right? Are there any other questions? Yes, please, sir. You have a question.
Is there a provision? Because from your answer, I don't see that the commission is precluded per se from access to this information.
Oh no, I don't think, and as I said at the outset, I don't think that the commission should be prevented if a complaint is made that one of its officers may have acted fraudulently from investigating. To me, they would be acting wrongly if they didn't explore to make sure their officers internally are honest and acting with integrity. But my answer to the question was I don't think that they can use that information to override their records, especially since that information is external information and not subject to the scrutiny of evidence as we know it.
Notwithstanding it coming from the police force.
Well, as I said, we've seen computer printouts before which are subject to some kind of problems.
How can these be challenged legally? It's either at the level of GICO itself or through a court. What can these people be asked to do or do in their own right to say, look, I was here at X time?
I don't think it is for anybody to say, as poor Mr. Dave Kisunas had to say, I was here next time. Because GCOM's record reflects that Dave Kisoon went to that place of poll and voted and showed his ID and his face was compared and he put his finger in the ink and his name was ticked off. GCOM's record says that. So to say to Dave Kisoon now 3 months after the event, please prove that you were here, when GCOM's record demonstrates he was here, I think is asking too much. That is exactly the point. GCOM's record is definitive where GCOM is concerned.
Yes, but in a situation where the observation reports will be used as part of the deliberative process, could there be the possibility of affidavits being provided to say, yes, I was here, to provide evidence in your passports, or whatever the case might be, that you did travel and you did return?
To me, the starting point of that question, Dennis, is that you are giving plausibility. You're trying to ascribe truth to what was a bare statement by a party rep saying Dave Kisoon was out of the country. But if GCOM's records say Dave Kisoon came and voted, why is it that one person standing up and saying without any evidence he was out of the country should galvanize GCOM to second guess its own carefully documented records, carefully prepared by a system that all parties were present and saw happen?
But usually the law, to what extent could GCOM invoke the law that asks the immigration authorities to send them the records for the people who have migrated as part of the cleansing of the list, in the same way that records are accessed from the registrar's office?
The cleansing of the list took place before the elections when they were put up for a claims and objections period. And the cleansing of the list takes place on a continuous basis under the legislation since over 10 years ago when that list was created. And births are recorded, deaths are recorded, and the information is sent to GCOM and the list is continuously updated. So there is a cleansing process of that list, and that list is intended to be permanent and permanently updated.
But the law also
No.
provides for immigration records to be part of the cleansing process. Would you agree?
No.
It doesn't?
No. Because the law says that if you are Guyanese, you may vote. So the fact that you, Dennis Chabral, might migrate to England, and there's a piece of computer record somewhere that says that in 2014 Dennis Shabral migrated to England, you're still entitled to vote, you're Guyanese. And therefore, you can come back from England as a registered voter and show your ID as a Guyanese and a registered voter, as many overseas Guyanese have done, and vote on election day.
Mr. Jonas, you made reference to cases in which persons appear on various platforms and indicated that they were in Guyana and they voted, contradicting the list provided to GCOM by the police commissioner. However, there's other person, and I could cite Mr. Bino. I think he wrote the commission on the 3rd, indicating that his name was a part of the list, but he wasn't in the country, and it's alleged that he would have voted. If it is found that indeed he was out of the country and he's alleged to have voted, how do you view that act? Do you think it warrants an investigation at this stage, or any concern?
If at some point it is proved that anybody is out the country on election day, if it is proved anybody's out the country on election day and you see a tick next to their name, that needs to be investigated. That is a problem. But right now, we are not dealing with a situation where something has been proved. Right now, we are dealing with a situation of bare, unsubstantiated allegations made. And then the request for evidence is given. No, not giving you the evidence. And Mr. Norton stood up here and said it's for GCOM to investigate. So we're not dealing with anything proved. We're dealing with bare allegations. And the response from Mr. James has already been discredited. So we are trading one spreadsheet for another. And why are we doing this? For 172 names, in a situation where one party appears to be in a lead of 13,000. Something is wrong with that.
What should be the authentication process? That if somebody comes up and says,
For the purposes of this election,
yes,
the authentication process can only be done in a court of law.
that's after the declaration
Um,
or before.
Dennis, I suspect that one party or another is going to try to go to court before this election is announced, before the result is announced. I don't see it happening successfully because GCOM, the courts have been very clear, GCOM has an obligation to do its job and announce a winner. And this kind of evidence, this kind of information, this kind of allegation, the Chief Justice said it very clearly, is material for the election petition after the declaration. So I don't see that it will have success, but when you talk about affidavits, affidavits are given to courts. And in court, the deponent of that affidavit is called and he's cross-examined on his affidavit. You don't just take it blindly. So that is the way, the location, the forum where it has to be explored. Any more questions?
Have you explored what are the possibilities legally for the commission to declare that elections were not credible, so cannot make a declaration?
There is no constitutional provision, and the drafters do not contemplate that possibility. One party wins, the other party does not. The other parties do not. And I can go this far. I can say that suppose there's a tie. Suppose by some miracle 700,000 people vote and 350,000 vote for you and 350,000 vote for me. Suppose by some miracle that happens. We know the chances of that are worse than winning the lotto. There's actually provision that you go and you do it by lot. You go to the chancellor and you do the equivalent of flipping a coin. So that is catered for. That eventuality, an almost impossible eventuality, is catered for. But it is not catered. The GCOM says, on my own record, having done my work and having my record and having counted the votes, I'm not going to declare on my own record. There's no provision like that.
As flawed as it may be.
Well, who says it's flawed?
Assuming that an election is flawed as it is.
You know, I want to discuss that actually. I'm glad you raised it. I've seen a lot of discussion about the flaws in the system. The system of elections in Guyana is a very good system. You have a list, and the list is updated with a transparent process. Just to be absolutely safe, before the elections, you're going to post up the list in the neighborhoods. And you say, if anybody got a problem with any names they see, come and tell us. This time they had 49 days to do it. Now, I'm sure you will agree with me that both APNU and PPP would have looked at those lists and laundered them till they were clean as could be. If they knew any problems with those lists, they would have dealt with it. And they had the resources, I'm sure they did. A good system. And then when you turn up to vote, we talk about showing the ID, comparing your face because your face is there. We talk about the presence of the APNU agent, the PPP agent, the GCOM agent, the local observers, the international observers. It's a good system. And then at that same place of poll, the presiding officer counts those ballots and generates the statement of poll and nails it up on the door outside for everybody to see. Our system is so good that when the corrupt individual within the system tried to undermine it, he was caught immediately. That's how good the system is. So when you talk about a flawed system, our system is not flawed, but there were individuals within the system who tried to undermine it, but demonstrated how good the system was because they were caught right away. You can never make sure that you only have angels and saints working for you. But the beauty of a good system is you immediately identify them when they act as a saint or an angel should not act. Are there any more questions? Thank you very much.